Motorists could be charged $3.50 to drive through Auckland's central city during peak hours in a bid to ease snaking traffic queues and snail-paced journeys. A joint government Auckland Council report says there's a strong case for congestion charging in the city, and it includes a short list of 5 charging options, one of which would ping motorists for driving into the city centre, along with strategic corridors, including some main motorways. Well, joining me now is the Auckland Mayor, Phil Goff. Good evening. How much would you be happy to pay for the privilege of driving into the city?
Oh, good evening, Lisa. Yeah, look, I'd be one of the people that would be paying because I travel into the city from the south every day. I don't think any of us welcome the idea that you've got to pay more for anything, but there are a couple of things that need to be thought about in this report. It is an officer's report. The next step will be to engage in pretty widespread public discussions, to talk to stakeholders in it. It wouldn't be net additional to, say, the regional fuel tax. As you phase in something like a congestion tax, if that's the decision made, you'd phase out the regional fuel tax.
So you're promising that the regional fuel tax will absolutely go if people are going to be charged any kind of congestion or toll?
That would be my intention if I was involved in making that decision.
That sounds a bit equivocal. Sorry.
This is going to be maybe 4 or 5 years out. So who knows what I might be doing in 4 or 5 years? But if we are to introduce something that is an additional tax on people for travelling, then you want it to replace, not be additional to existing costs that are met by motorists.
Okay.
So I think that needs to be a quid pro quo, yeah.
Get you on that. One of the recommended charges was $3.50, I think it was, to go into the city. But also one of the identified good options, if you like, was a combo scenario where they'd charge you for coming into the central city, but would also charge you for using what they call these strategic corridors. But those corridors appears to be, State Highway 20, State Highway 1, State Highway 16, and a whole bunch of other large roads. That's every pretty much option to pass through the city, isn't it?
It's the congested corridors. I mean, they're talking about phasing it in, maybe starting with a cordon in the city centre and then dealing with the strategic corridors. One of the important prerequisites to that is that you have, what are you trying to do? You're trying to cut congestion and you're trying to encourage people to shift either the time that they travel or the mode of their travelling. Now, if you want to encourage people to take public transport, then you need effective and accessible public transport systems. So they're suggesting, for example, that the city centre not come in until after the city rail link is completed.
So realistically, how far off are we talking if you do have to have a really joined up public transport system before you do this?
I think you're talking that this would not be introduced before 2025. So you're talking about at least another full 4 years out. There's 2 prerequisites from my point of view, or 3 actually. One is that it replace and not be additional to another form of road tax like the regional fuel tax. 2, you need to have the public transport systems in place. So if you're looking at 2025, you'd have a new Eastern busway, you'd have an extended Northern busway, you'd have bus lanes on the Northwestern motorway, and you'd have the city rail link. But the other factor that I think is really important, Lisa, it won't break my bank if I've got to pay that, but there are a lot of people out there that are low-income earners, and the congestion tax would have a greater impact on them. And I think that you have to have a discount system to cater for equity purposes for those that have to travel on. Well, it would be a discounted fee. You wouldn't be paying at the moment. The proposal is $3.50. Shoulder time would be $1.50, and weekends and off-peak times and off-shoulder times would be free. So what you'd be wanting to do is to keep the cost down to low-income earners, because there are people, the city's full of people who are earning less well-paying jobs, and I think for fairness reasons, you've got to make special provision for them.
So realistically, though, how would that work? Do you then have to fill out a form with all your income-related material, get an exemption card, and then the system costs us more because it becomes cumbersome and bureaucratic?
Oh, well, I think, for some that are not wage earners but are low-income earners, low-income income receivers, you'd have, community services card would discount it. And for others, look, where there's a will, there's a way. You could introduce a system that is not administratively top-heavy, but to allow you to make, a significant discount for people that are low-income earners. And I think you have to do that for fairness reasons. I don't think you can say you want low-income workers in the city, serving in the food bars and the cafeterias and everything else, but it's going to cost them a fortune to come in. I think you've got to cater for that income group, and the report suggests that.
What does the modelling tell you about what it would do to traffic congestion, and how much revenue would you get out of it?
Well, the modelling says that if you follow something like the Stockholm or the Gothenburg model in Sweden, they cut congestion by 20 to 25%. This report is much more modest. It talks about 8 to 12%. So that would mean that your normal drive into the city would then be about as if you were driving in during the school holidays when the traffic flows much freer. So that's the first benefit. We've talked about the costs. Let's talk about the benefits. So cutting back congestion for those that still have to use the road is an important one. Increasing or diminishing productivity costs. We know that the cost of productivity of congestion is something between $1 and $2 billion. So you'd be helping out there. If you are encouraging mode shift to public transport, then you're talking about cutting congestion and cutting carbon emissions. So that's a real benefit as well. And look, if you don't do something like this and you say, look, all we can do is build more and more infrastructure, then we'll be paying higher taxes or higher rates to pay for more infrastructure rather than saying, how can we use the infrastructure we've already got better?
There's two things I want to get through pretty quickly because we're running out of time. A lot of the analysis is based on case studies, including Stockholm, which you just mentioned. And actually there's a footnote in other material produced by the council which says Auckland's vastly different from Stockholm, doesn't have the high use of public transport as that city, and the higher density of trips in the central area. And also they held a referendum to get people on board. So you're comparing with apples with pears, aren't you, here?
Yeah, but you're also looking at the other cities that are currently bringing it in. New York has already made the decision to bring it in.
And London is back to the same levels of congestion that it had before it introduced the congestion charge.
London only has a partial system, the central cordon. It has worked to some degree, but it's not the full answer. But look, other cities that are much more like us, Los Angeles, Vancouver, Melbourne, Sydney, and other cities around the world like Beijing, they're all contemplating bringing in a demand management system. And you've got to ask the question, well, why are so many cities considering this? And the answer to that is because if you actually want to deal with congestion, and as we get bigger and bigger, it becomes a bigger and bigger problem, then they say this is one vital part of the jigsaw puzzle that will enable us to reduce congestion. If you don't want to reduce congestion, fine, we'll just keep on as we are at the moment. But I think most of us understand that we have to take some action to reduce congestion. But before any decision is made, then we're going to work with the AA, we're going to work with the road transport freighters, we're going to work with all of the stakeholders, and we're going to talk with the public.
Sorry to interrupt, Phil, but you need a law change, right? And this government's already stated really clearly no new taxes, so this is going nowhere fast, is it?
No, I disagree with that. If it's a replacement, at the moment the regional fuel tax brings in about 150 million.
So you're saying congestion charging isn't a new tax?
If it's a replacement for another one, then it's not a net additional tax, and that's
it's a new and different tax, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but look.
And they've said no new taxes. So there you go.
Let's have a think about this. The Working Party was set up under National. They were keen for it, and I think they still are. Labor picked it up and said, yes, we can see the sense of it. I think the Green Party would be keen on it for its environmental effects, and I think the ACT Party would believe in it because they believe in user pays. So I think you would probably, and what you're trying to do is get a cross-party, cross-community consensus around how we can best deal with a problem that is a huge problem for Auckland, and it's called congestion. It won't be one single answer, but it has to be a combination of answers, and this may need to be part of that combination if the public agrees that that's a good idea.
Nice to talk to you. That is Auckland Mayor Phil Goff there.